Welcome back! So far we've talked about what strategic nonviolent resistance is and why it's more effective than violent resistance. But you may still be wondering, so other than not hurting people, how does it actually work? Good question. The main objective of a strategic nonviolent resistance movement is simple. Divide the regime from its sources of power. A regime is only as powerful as the people and institutions that support it. These institutions are often referred to by movement leaders as the regime's pillars of support. Pillars of support are what keep the regime standing and generally fall under these broad categories: police, military, judicial and electoral institutions, civil servants, educational systems, organized religious institutions, media, and businesses. Different regimes may have different core pillars of support holding them up. For instance, Nazi Germany had a regime that's core pillars may have looked something like this. The Taliban regime's pillars of support may look more like this. Each pillar is often made up of even smaller organizations, ultimately composed of individuals. Sometimes these individuals unwittingly support the regime simply by doing their job. Swaying these pillars often doesn't start with toppling the entire institution. It can start with swaying key individuals or smaller organizations within the institution. In any case, the idea is to target the most swayable pillars with the most influence, causing support for the regime to tumble. There are two ways to do this. The first is to push pillars away by attacking them. For instance, in the Maldives, the resistance publicized which hotels were funding government torture, and these hotels were boycotted, threatening a massive blow to the regime's finances. The regime had no choice but to comply to the demands of the resistance. The second way to topple a pillar is by pulling the pillar toward you, meaning you turn the pillar to your side. This is not always possible, but it is advisable whenever possible because when you pull the pillars toward you, you are building more support for the resistance at the same time you're reducing support for the regime. Furthermore, when pillars of support are attacked, it can backfire, making other pillars of support feel defensive and cling more tightly to the regime, making it harder to topple them. An example of a movement pulling pillars of support toward it is in the Philippine People Power movement in the 1980s. Activists surrounded soldiers, shaking their hands, offering them hamburgers, donuts, and orange soda, causing the commanding officer to withdraw his troops. This act of camaraderie was so disarming, the soldiers no longer felt motivated to attack. Soldiers, it turns out, do not like fighting their own friends. Either way, once pillars fall, the regime follows. That is the heart of all strategic nonviolent resistance movements, toppling pillars of support. You may be thinking, that doesn't sound easy. How can a movement ensure success? Check out the next video to see what elements are needed for a successful nonviolent resistance movement.